Well, with that, let's bring in our bureau chiefs right now. Robert Fife is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa bureau chief for La Presse. They are at the National Archives building. And here in studio, Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Hello to the three of you.
Hi there.
So here we are. Hello. Listen, so we've been covering this story for well over a year now. We now have this final report from Justice Hogue. I'll begin with initial impressions and get you to start us out, Tonda. What did you make of what we heard from the Chief Commissioner here?
I think that the Commissioner's done us all a great public service by putting in perspective all the intelligence we've heard about and the parliamentary report that was so explosive last spring that seemed to contradict sort of the lines the government had initially taken. And I think she's put it all in perspective, and I hope that it takes some of the temperature down, while she has not exonerated neither the government nor the watchdog agencies nor CISA from doing a better job on communicating both within government and to each other and to MPs who might be affected by foreign interference, but also to Canadians. So kudos to her on a job that hopefully puts things in perspective, and now I think presents a huge challenge for everybody, including opposition parties, to put the thing in perspective and deal with what does need doing, especially now that we're into leadership and possibly an election soon, and not get hung up on their interpretation or their version of events.
Okay, well, we'll pick up on some of those points in a bit, but Bob, JD, and I'll get you to start us out here. Bob, what do you make, your initial impressions, again, on such an important report from the Chief Commissioner, who's been looking at a topic that has really overtaken the national agenda for well over a year now?
Well, look, I think this commission has been absolutely important for Canadian democracy. It's allowed Canadians to have a much deeper understanding of how foreign governments meddle in Canadian domestic affairs, particularly in elections. She has laid out the problems in the system and what steps have already been taken to improve the flow of information so that governments are acting much more quickly and much more seriously on foreign interference. She's made a number of 51 recommendations, of which close to half can be implemented potentially before the next election campaign. That's going to be the onus on the government as well. And remember her first report, the government acted very quickly in bringing a foreign agent registry, making foreign interference a criminal offense, and also making significant changes to the CSIS Act so that CSIS can be much more forthcoming to the Canadian public. So all in all, I think this has been a great effort for the Canadian public. And you know, we were stuck with the former government wanted to have a report by former Governor General David Johnston, and it really was a whitewash. It was dismissed. Nobody can dismiss the seriousness of the report that she's handed in to the government today.
JD, your initial impressions?
Totally agree with my two colleagues. This was a very healthy exercise for the state, for the sake of our democracy. I think our democracy is stronger today as a result of this exercise. And Commissioner Hogue, I think, pointed out some of the failings and that in the system, but also inside the government, in terms of communicating the appropriate security intelligence to the appropriate people. And that was, I think, one of the big misgivings. And also, I think she's offering a report that will reassure Canadians about the state of our democracy. She concluded that there was no traitor in Parliament, as we had, some had said that there was some traitor MPs in Parliament. She said this is not the case. It's marginal. So I think it brings some reassurance to the Canadian public as we are heading towards the federal election. It's coming in soon enough. And also the fact that Bob mentioned that the government enacted a Foreign Registry Act that was, passed last year. There's also some effect that is also felt in the current leadership race. For example, the Liberal Party decided to bring down the rules, or make it tighter rules to make sure that people who are from outside Canada cannot vote in the leadership race, as it was the case in the past. So that's a very good report on all aspects, I would say.
Yeah, and interesting to point out, soon as the leadership race was determined it was going to happen, immediately there were questions about who could get to vote, who would actually be a member, which without a doubt is a fallout of the whole controversy on foreign interference. But when you look at the criticisms here, Tonda, you have essentially Justice Hogue taking issue with the actions of the PMO, taking issue with the conclusions of NSICOP. What do you make of that criticism and what it tells us about the ability of Parliament as is to take on the issue of foreign interference?
Well, I think she's raised a really interesting question around, and let's just deal with the NSICOP report. The Trudeau government established an all-parliamentary committee to be the ones to have access to classified information in order to be sort of that ability to both oversee what the security agencies are doing and convey publicly necessary national security information, warnings, red flags, are the agencies functioning the way they should? And she's pretty clearly said and laid out a picture, which I find troubling. It sounds like the MPs don't know how to actually process what they're hearing, that they rely or overemphasize aspects of intelligence. They haven't processed her main thrust of saying that intelligence is not necessarily facts. It has to be understood and interpreted. And so I think that this raises big questions about how Parliament oversees national security agencies, their work. Separately, and apart from that, how the agencies communicate with the government. She's also communicated that as a problem. And again, in elections then, if there are red flags to be raised about what foreign countries are doing in our elections or leadership races or nominations, how does that get conveyed to the parties and the public? That's, I think, a separate question, and I think she's established a bunch of recommendations that could go a long way to helping us with that. But I found that all these years I thought, if MPs had eyes on it, it would be a way for us to understand it better. But clearly that report was unnecessarily inflammatory.
Bob, what do you make of it? Again, Justice Hogue taking issue with the actions of the PMO and also the actions of this parliamentary watchdog.
Well, I thought what she had to say about the fact that CSIS or intelligence agencies have a much better job, need to do a much better job of transparency and openness. She was complimentary about investigative journalism that has been able to expose a lot of what had been going on, but she said that's not the solution. The solution is for our security agencies to be more proactive, to be more transparent, not only with members of Parliament, but with the Canadian public, so that we don't have to, so we're not relying on a leak from a national security agent when the duty of these agencies is to stop this secrecy. Obviously, there's some stuff that they can't, but to lift everybody's boat, so to speak, so that we're all better informed as Canadians. And to me, that's probably the most important recommendation out of this. I mean, she's got a lot of really good recommendations, but the overall recommendation seems to me is that, okay, this is serious. It's not going to go away. The only way we're going to deal with it, if we all, whether you're members of Parliament or a government bureaucrat, a journalist or a voting public, you have to know what's going on, and it's the duty of the government and the security agencies to inform us.
Yeah, in other words, a whole of government response with perhaps a whole of country awareness of the issue itself. Joël-Denis, what were you going to say to that?
Well, to Bob's point, the judge says this is crucial to reestablish the confidence of Canadians towards the institutions, how you communicate secret information that touches national security. How do you communicate it to the public so that they're reassured about the safety of our elections, the integrity of our elections? That's critical to her. And she also had a few good points on the diaspora communities in Canada, and I think that is crucial because those are the first victims of foreign interference, and it is very critical that the government takes that into account and find ways to better protect those communities as they are facing often foreign interference activities from either China, Russia, or Iran, or even India. So that's a critical element.
Critical element, as you say. So in many ways, with these recommendations, we're looking at the Trudeau government to implement, at the very least, the dozen or so recommendations she's making in order to address the fact that we are facing an early election very soon, Tonda. But, you know, I'm also wondering what pressure this creates for the opposition leader, because without naming names, Justice Hogue clearly says that every political leader needs to get the security clearance, which Pierre Poilievre still refuses to do, in order to be informed of these issues.
She put, I think, enormous pressure today on Pierre Poilievre, without naming him, to not only get the security clearance, but to commit to some of these reforms as well. And to trust that, I think that Canadians can stand to hear what it is the agencies might say about any particular party, including his own. So I think she's put pressure on him, not just in terms of getting the security clearance, but also committing to some of the reforms she's recommended, right? So we may be into an election campaign long before any of this stuff gets done. But it requires, I think, now both the leadership candidates for the Liberal Party and the Conservatives before a campaign, and I guess the NDP as well, to lay out how would they tackle this stuff. I mean, the stuff about, you know, instituting ways to detect and report on AI and deep fakes, and, you know, the transparency that she wants around third-party financing and political and involvement in political campaigns. That's important stuff, but they can all commit to it today. Nobody needs to wait until there's a next government.
Bob, what do you say to that?
No, I totally agree. We'll wait until this afternoon. I imagine the government's going to come out, as they did after the first report, and say that they're going to try to bring in some of these recommendations. I hope so. And I hope that Mr. Poilievre will show some real leadership and say that he will get a national security clearance so that he can hear about some of the apparently troubling intelligence that was raised about some Conservative Party members, and we'll see what happens with that. One of the other things, I just have to mention this, Michael, because Han Dong, now an independent MP, but a Liberal MP, had sued Global Television because they'd said that he had told the Chinese Consul General that the two Michaels should be kept in prison. In the report today, Justice Hogue said that is absolutely false, that he never said that in the intelligence that she'd seen, and that basically she exonerated him. So, you know, the inquiry is good in this sense too, because somebody who had his name blackened can now hold his head up high, and perhaps the Liberal Party will let him run again, and I imagine Global is going to have to cut a big check to him.
And JD, beyond that, what do you make of, in terms of the pressure this creates on all political parties, including Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives?
Well, Justice Marie-Josée Hogue did her work. She saw evidence through the legal lenses that was necessary to, you know, take the good work of the CSIS, and that should not be taken, you know, with a grain of salt. She put that in a report now. I think that she's throwing the ball in the political court. It's going to be up to the political parties to react appropriately, given the work she has done, the colossal work that she has done. And so it's going to be up to the government and the opposition parties to come up with concrete actions to follow up on that report. That is a major boost for our democracy, I would argue.
Okay, concrete actions, the words you are using. And as you say that, I want to read right now. This is a statement that we're getting from Ruby Sohota, the Minister for Democratic Institutions, as well as David McGuinty, the Minister for Public Safety, in a statement that essentially thanks Justice Hogue for the work she has done and for this final report on the public inquiry into foreign interference. They also say, quote, "Today the government is taking further action to protect our election integrity with the following investments: $44 million starting in 2025-26 and $9.8 million ongoing for the Office of the Chief Electoral Officer to ensure a sufficient investigation capacity to protect against persistent threats to the electoral process, such as foreign interference and disinformation. $27.5 million starting in 2025-26 with a temporary increase of $2 million in 2025-26 for the Canadian Heritage's Digital Citizen Initiative to fund projects that build citizen resilience against online disinformation, and $5.95 million starting in 24-25 for Global Affair Canada's rapid response mechanism to bolster its capacity to monitor and strengthen defenses of the Canadian open source information ecosystem and keep Canadians informed of possible foreign interference during the election. So immediately we're seeing a response here from government. Of course, they've had time to plan this, knowing that something was going to come out today. But multiple millions of dollars here, Tonda.
$73.5 million mostly for some of the systems that are already in action. The rapid response mechanism reports within Global Affairs on foreign interference activities that they detect online, and then there's also some technical support through the Digital Center, or the Digital Citizen Initiative. But what's interesting, the bulk of it, $44 million going to the Office of the Chief Electoral Officer to boost their investigative capacity. That means to detect it, to go out and perhaps and see and investigate if there are scurrilous activities going on the ground in ridings, perhaps. And I'm interested in that because it's not just that. I mean, I think with some of the changes that the government made in terms of the foreign interference law, perhaps that'll be a more robust response. I think there are probably still, though, recommendations from Madame Hogue that the government will have to act on. And today we only have a commitment for them to review them, and this will guide our further action. So I think that, questions still have to be asked, just how far they're prepared to go to lift the veil on this thing.
Lift the veil, as you say, but immediate action here. And this is important, Bob, because we are not only now in the midst of a leadership review, or leadership race, rather, for the Liberal Party, also within weeks, months of another federal campaign. How important is this reaction from the Trudeau government at this point?
Oh, it's very important, and we need to see some more action. All the other recommendations dealing with disinformation and AI and all that stuff that's being used that we expect will become pretty predominant during the general election campaign. We now know, thanks to this public inquiry, the extent of how states use disinformation campaigns to elect or defeat people that they don't like, or elect somebody they think might be friendlier to them. And this is something we never got from the report from former Governor General David Johnston, and that's why I really do believe that judicial and public inquiries are always the best way to go when you have serious issues confronting the country and looking for solutions. I mean, we saw 150 witnesses, 35 days of testimony. The highest bureaucrats in the country, our spy agencies, the Prime Minister, all of these people testifying about how they've dealt with and the shortcomings of dealing with foreign interference. That would not have happened if we did not have a public inquiry headed by a judge. And I say to her, hats off to her for doing a really excellent job here.
Yeah, well, let's pick up on that. But, sorry, JD, go ahead.
I would add to what Bob is saying. I think this was, like as I said, a very healthy exercise, and I would argue that maybe it should be done on a regular basis, maybe every 7 years, to look at whether our institutions are resilient enough and our laws are adapted to a continuing, evolving threat, which is foreign interference, as Justice Marie-Josée Hogue put it in her report. So it should be like we review election acts every time there's an election on a regular basis. I think maybe this should be done, an exercise that should be done on a regular basis. Maybe not every 5 years, but at least on a regular basis.
A regular basis, as you say. I've got about 5 minutes here, and Bob was talking about the open transparency of this process. But before we're done, just a quick go around, because this government has been criticized for not taking security issues seriously enough, beyond foreign interference, a number of other issues. I'm wondering if you think, now that we have this public inquiry and foreign interference issuing this final report, Tonda, are we now in the midst of a culture change in this country that will make permanent security as a top priority that we need to keep an eye on?
Gee, never say. I'm not going to, I can't gaze into a crystal ball. I think what's about to become the most pressing issue of our day is the economy, the Trump tariff threats, and all of that. National security is always an ongoing major concern for governments. The difference is that the public really doesn't understand, know it, see how the agencies function, know the threats that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, right? So, but what I think it does do, though, is it has pushed this particular issue to the forefront and given voice also to the diaspora communities who are the biggest target of foreign interference. If you're a Chinese Canadian in this country, you probably have felt on some level a degree of meddling in, your life or your political views, or a pressure to do something or not do something, right? And I think that these are really important issues, and we've given, I think, a huge stage for the whole country to recognize that, and I think any government coming forward will be in a position where they can't ignore it. Again.
And picking up on your point, Chinese Canadians, because as we heard throughout the Commission's work, the People's Republic of China being the largest perpetrator, biggest player in foreign interference, yes. But not to forget India, Pakistan, Iran, and Russia getting involved in this.
For sure.
Bob, do you see this as a change in the culture as to how we deal with security and foreign interference in this country?
Well, first of all, I think the failure of the Commission's report has been an inability to make a lot of recommendations to deal with transnational repression. And she said part of the reason is that she didn't have a mandate to do so. It'd be nice if we could go back and try to figure out good ways from the government to go back to the diaspora communities to get their recommendations and try to implement them. But the biggest problem with this whole issue, and has been this for a very long time, is in this country is excessive secrecy. It's not just about national security issues like foreign interference, but we have too much secrecy in this country. And if there's anything that's come out of this inquiry, it's the Justice Hogue saying, stop it. Stop the excessive secrecy, open the doors, let people know what's going on. You as security agencies have to stop trying to keep everything to yourself. The only way you're going to deal with foreign interference and meddling in Canadian democracy is to let sunshine shine in.
JD?
Well, as you know, we talked about the fact that there's an election, federal election, maybe this spring, and so it's going to be the very first test after this report is published. And I'm raising a question to all of us. What will be the government's reaction to somebody who's actually close to Donald Trump, the owner of X, Elon Musk, who is actually using his platform to endorse and even disseminate disinformation? So that's going to be a big test. Will we take the big social media as X, TikTok, those platforms to the task and tell them to stop spreading disinformation? This is going to be the test soon enough.
Yeah, soon enough, as we also heard from NDP MP Charlie Angus this week. But listen, that is the time we have today. Thank you very much for adding your insight into this final report. Bob Fife of the Globe and Mail, Joël-Denis Bellavance of La Presse, and here in studio, Tonda MacCharles of the Toronto Star.